The Late Great Planet Earth is the title of a best-selling 1970 book by Hal Lindsey with Carole C.Carlson, and first published by Zondervan. The book was adapted by Rolf, Forsberg and Amram in 1976 into a movie narrated by Orson Welles and released by Pacific International Enterprises. It was originally ghost-written by Carlson, whom later printings credited as co-author. Lindsey and Carlson went on to write several sequels, including Satan is Alive and Well on Planet Earth and the 1980s Countdown to Armageddon. Premise and plot. The Late Great Planet Earth is a treatment of literalist, premillennial, dispensational eschatology. As such, it compared end-time prophecies in the Bible with then-current events in an attempt to broadly predict future scenarios leading to the rapture of believers before the tribulation and second coming of Christ to establish his thousand-year kingdom on earth, focusing on key passages in the books of Daniel, Ezekiel and Revelation. Lindsey originally suggested the possibility that these climactic events might play out in the 1980s, which he interpreted as one generation from the foundation of modern Israel in 1948. A pivotal event in some conservative evangelical schools of eschatological thought. Cover art on the Bantam edition boldly suggested that the 1970s were the era of the Antichrist as foretold by Moses and Jesus, and called the book a penetrating look at incredible ancient prophecies involving this generation. Descriptions of alleged fulfilled prophecy were offered as proof of the infallibility of God's word, and evidence that unfulfilled prophecies would soon find their denouement in God's plan for the planet. He cited an increase in the frequency of famines, wars and earthquakes as key events leading up to the end of the world. He also foretold a Soviet invasion of Israel. Lindsey also predicted that the European Economic Community, which preceded the European Union, was destined to become a United States of Europe, which in turn he says is destined to become a revived Roman Empire ruled by the Antichrist. Lindsey wrote that he had concluded, since there was no apparent mention of America in the books of Daniel or Revelation, that America would not be a major player on the geopolitical stage by the time the tribulations of the end times arrive. He found little in the Bible that could represent America, but he suggested that Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 13 could be speaking of America in part. Although Lindsey did not claim to know the dates of future events with any certainty, he suggested that Matthew chapter 24 verses 32 to 34 indicated that Jesus' return might be within one generation of the rebirth of the State of Israel and the rebuilding of the Jewish temple, and Lindsey asserted that, in the Bible, one generation is 40 years. Some readers took this as an indication that the tribulation of the rapture would occur no later than 1988. In his 1980 work The 1980s Countdown to Armageddon, Lindsey predicted that the decade of the 1980s could very well be the last decade of history as we know it. Popular culture. The Late Great Planet Earth was the first Christian prophecy book to be picked up by a secular publisher and sell many copies. Despite some dated content, 28 million copies had sold by 1990. The film The Late Great Planet Earth was narrated by Orson Welles and released in theaters in 1979.